Tacky and understaffed. Great. Hello?
Hello, welcome to PlayStation Access. My name is Rob. Joining us is Rosie.
Hello, everyone.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is out. It's here.
It's time for the world to be taken over by Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Well, my world has been taken over by Final Fantasy VII Rebirth for the last 2.5 weeks now. We've been lucky enough to be playing it. We have a video on the channel from last week, but now the game is out, we can talk about a little bit more. Don't worry, we're still not going to be doing any story spoilers because we wouldn't want to do that at all. But there is so much in this game that, as a fan of the original Final Fantasy VII, the amount of times I've just been like, oh, like the Leo DiCaprio meme. Oh, they've done that. I just love it so much. There's so much to talk about. Obviously, we can't cover everything, but I thought we should take this opportunity to just gush about those things we've seen in the game that we've really loved, because it's the thing that strikes me the most. It's such a joyous game.
It's a very joyous game.
It's such a vibrant, funny, colourful game. Remake was, I think, by its very nature, it was set in Midgar, quite an oppressive, grey, industrial, claustrophobic place. Not much natural sunlight coming in. You know, everything's a bit sad. Mako reactors are being blown up. It's, you know, and then there's that bit in the original Final Fantasy VII when you leave Midgar for the first time, and you often get this in open world games where you see the open world for the first time. That moment of looking and taking in the scope and the scale of what you've got to explore. Yeah. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is that moment, just like
repeated,
just projected across. Like probably 100 hours of gameplay. Yeah, it's that moment all the time. It's constantly making you feel like that. And
because when I say repeated, I mean like you go to one open world region, you're like wow, and then you go to another one, you're like wow. It's always just every time they introduce the new segment for the open world, it's like there's so much.
I can't believe how big and varied these open world segments are. They're all huge as well. This is the thing, they're all enormous, and they've got there's so much to do in them. Everything is quite a satisfying thing as well. Like everything you explore, sort of like there's a reason for it. So there are life stream crystals, for example, and the music when you get to a life stream crystal, it's the live stream music from the original game. It's that little plinky plonky doo doo doo. But anyway, you scan the live stream crystals. It often will, you'll get information on other things that are in the open world. It'll feed back into a system of experience that Chadley, the little guy from Remake, he's back.
Little guy.
He asks you when you first encounter him, he's like, do you remember me? And there is the option to be like, no. Don't remember you. But it's really worth doing all the open world stuff. A, because it's often really fun and intriguing and encourages you to explore every area of the open world, but also it feeds into this experience system, like this world intel it's called, and if Chadley collects enough world intel, he's able to develop quite unique orbs of materia for you. But I cannot believe how amazing those open world segments are to explore. Like the calm grasslands, just utterly beautiful. But I think my favourite so far has to be the Junon area, what they've done with it. Like the imagination to create what they've created. When you think back to the original game, it was just a slab of green, just a little bit of green in between the Mithril mines and Junon, the city itself. They've turned it into this. There's like a whole pirate shipyard bit that's just so much fun to explore.
Yes, yeah.
And just there's always something that you can see. Like, oh, what's that up there? I wonder what happens if I go up there. And it's so much fun to explore. And the view of the big Junon cannon.
Oh, it's bliss. I really like the missions where they say you have to take a picture or something. You've got snaps or snap, and he's like, take a picture. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a pretty scene. So when you're talking about pictures of it, and you can see the cannon in the background and stuff, I really like those missions because it's like they've purposefully designed a pretty landscape.
Yeah, it's so impressive though, I think, taking what is essentially a blank canvas, like a pretty uninspiring stretch of world map from the original Final Fantasy VII. Just essentially some area between one story point and another story point. and they've just thought to themselves, okay, what would, and that's another thing, when you're getting this world intel, you get little bits of history about each region. You can learn a bit about the story of Junon, for example, and it dives a little bit more into the story of Junon. And I feel like I know a lot more about the Republic of Junon and its history with Shinra than I did playing the original Final Fantasy VII. And the open world area around it correlates to everything. So they're talking about an old war that Junon had, the Republic of Junon, and so there's a reason for there to be loads of like abandoned shipwrecks and like a ship graveyard essentially, and exploring, and like an old pirate. It's basically like an ancient pirate's cove essentially. That's what it feels like exploring this place. It's so much fun to explore.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And you get a real sense as well from just the NPC inhabitants of the world. You go into Under Junon, which again in the original Final Fantasy VII there's not much to write home about there. You do the classic mini game with Mr. Dolphin and with Priscilla when you're trying to resuscitate her. But there's that lift right in Under Junon that takes you up to the upper city. Yeah. And Shinra has like commandeered it for their own. You go into Under Junon in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and there's a bunch of residents there with like placards, like doing a mini protest, like, this is our lift, we want our lift back,
this is our town.
And you get a real sense, it feels, it's a bit of a cliche to say this about open worlds, but it really does feel alive. It feels like these people are living a life here before you came along, and will continue to live their lives after you've been there as well. That's also one of my favourite picturesque spots is Under Junon, on that little beach bit where Mr. Dolphin comes, just looking out of that calm, rippling water, and you can just see this enormous cannon. Like you really do get a sense of scale of how big the Junon cannon is as well, which is just incredibly exciting. But again, there's just everything is done with so much joy. Like, there's still very serious, dark moments in the story, of course. If you know the story of Final Fantasy VII, you'll know what happens. But like, I've lost count of the amount of times the game has made me actually laugh out loud. Like, genuinely
it's a very
laugh.
funny game. Like, even the whole segment when you're above Junon and you're in more, like, not the Undercity part, but above it, and you're walking around and you have to find other soldiers and things like that to join your parade.
That bit was amazing.
It was so good.
Fantastic.
Like, I ran around and found like everyone I could, and then even when you're running around and you just bump into them, they're like, "We're looking forward to a celebratory drink, sir," and like just the character that everyone has.
I completely agree. I thought that bit was a real standout for me. Because again, in the original Final Fantasy VII, there's that iconic sequence where you have to learn the little parade drill movements, and you have to get involved in the parade. And like with everything, with Remake and now with Rebirth, everything from the original was expanded and blown up. And that segment where you have to go around and Cloud has to find the soldiers to compete in he has to find the 7th Infantry, and they're all dotted around various places in bars and in shops, and some of them are taking actually no, I'm not going to spoil that, you can just go with that for yourself. There's one bit as well, there's one bar that they go into, which again I will let you discover for yourself, that made me laugh a lot. I
had the biggest smile on my face. I was so happy that it existed. I was like, yes.
It made me feel seen. And it really made me feel a connection with those Shinra troops. Yeah. And that's another thing it does so well, is like, it humanizes all of those characters. And when you have like 50 of them, and even from a technical standpoint, I thought that bit was so cool.
Yeah, seeing them all coming down the stairs and
there's
the
like
streets.
50 of them following. Yeah. And one of them will be like, "Really liking your folios, sir," and all the other 50 will be like, "First class folios, sir." And the way they all, I felt so good, that whole bit. I was like, oh yeah, I am the captain of the 7th Infantry.
I did it as well when I went in a couple of loops just to turn around and see my crew just walking down that one corridor in like the market area. I was like, here they all come, and you see them marching along. I loved it.
It made me really want to win the President's Commendation.
I really wanted it for them.
Yeah, it was, that whole section, I had just a massive smile on my face. Yeah. It was just real fan service. I really feel like it's, even if you haven't played Final Fantasy VII before, Rebirth is a brilliant open world role-playing game with a fantastic combat system. If you are a fan of Final Fantasy VII, there's so much here that has been made just for you, for us. Like, they're really thinking about absolutely even tiny little moments. There was one moment, and I'd forgotten about this until I was playing it with the original with Dave on our series that we're doing, when you're in the prison underneath the Gold Saucer, the Corel prison.
Yes.
There's that weird little man who's sort of like follows you around really close to you. In Rebirth, there's a group of there's like a little tiny side quest is made of it.
It's like there's 3 of them,
isn't
there?
There's 3 stalkers, and they'll sort of follow you around, and you get to go to sleep in the truck.
Yes.
You get to rest in the truck, just like in the original game. Just tiny little details like that they've remembered. This is clearly a game that has been made by Final Fantasy VII fans as well. And I love that coming together of the generations. There's quite a few developers who were there, over 25 years ago making the original, and there's also a fresh generation of people who were fans at the time who are now making this game. And I think it's so clearly been made by people who absolutely love Final Fantasy VII. It's just a big gift.
Just by people who love chocobos as well. I love the chocobo love in Rebirth. I just have to say, I love how you can traversing on a chocobo. I love how they look. They look so wonderful. I love the I believe they're like adolescent chocobos that are by the bus stops. I love them, and I have to pet them at least twice. First with their head, and then later on you rub their cheeks.
Have you seen Cloud's face when he's doing it?
Yeah, it's like the only time Cloud smiles is when he's with
his little grinning face when he's have a look at. Pan the camera onto Cloud's face when he's petting those little chocobos. Another location I think is worth mentioning, which really has been fleshed out and expanded, is Costa del Sol.
Yes.
Which in the original game, it's just an inn, basically. You get off the boat, you rest there, and then you immediately leave. A lot more is made of it. Again, we're not going to spoil specifics of what happens there. There are lots of fun mini-games to be played in Costa del Sol.
Mini-games, yeah.
And you get to enjoy the beach a lot more than you did in the original game. But just it feels like a vacation destination.
Well, one thing I really like about this is that the party do know that they've got this huge mission, but sometimes they can they're at a waiting point. Like they're following the rogue people and things like that. So they do know that, well, we might as well enjoy some of this while we're here. And like just moments where they all go on the beach, and then afterwards when it's more sunset and they're relaxing, it's just really nice to see the party doing the adventure and embracing the adventure, but also having those moments where they're like, you know what, let's just bond and have a nice time together.
I agree, and I think that's a great segue into talking about the party, because, well, for me anyway, what I've always loved about Final Fantasy is A, the stories, but B, experiencing that story with a really lovable group of characters. And I don't think there's a group of characters more iconic than the Final Fantasy VII cast. And a lot of effort has been made in Rebirth to really reinforce those relationships, not just through the story, but through gameplay as well. So you've got they've all got like a little smiley face icon above their head that you can see throughout the game, and during moments in the story you get to talk to your party members and you get to choose how you respond to them, and those responses affect your relationship with them. There's also side quests that specific characters
will
take more of an interest in, and if you complete those side quests, there are tiers of completing side quests as well. So you notice this, Rosie. Sometimes when you complete a side quest, you'll get a little gold star. Sometimes you won't. So you can complete a side quest, or you can complete it really well if you fulfill a bunch of criteria, and that can deepen your bond with specific characters as well.
It also affects the scene as well, though. So the one that I did, there was a moment where they're taking a picture, and when you do it with one option, the picture was a bit blurred.
Right.
But then when you do it with the other option,
the better option,
you get a clearer picture as how it's intended to be like. So there are definitely little rewards depending on how you progress in the side quests.
But I just do love. We're talking about it very mechanically there, but just the vibe of being on this adventure with this group of characters and their relationships and seeing them blossom is so well done in this game. Like I feel like such a connection with everyone in my party. I want to give a shout out to Yuffie as well, who's obviously an optional character in the original Final Fantasy VII, brought in as part of the main story here, and her relationship with and interactions with your gang, especially Barret.
I love Barret's introduction to Yuffie. Like the way that those two first meet and they sort of speak to each other, it just sums them up perfectly, and I love it.
Yeah, it's really something. And then you get the synergy abilities and synergy skills, and there's so much flavour in just those animations as well. I think they did the rounds on the internet, Aerith and Barret's synergy skill, where Aerith puts on Barret's sunglasses for a little bit, and I just love it. Everything is geared towards reinforcing how close those bonds are.
Yeah.
And seeing where they go in the story really is something special. The mini games as well.
I was going to say,
we should touch on. Quite a lot of the mini games from the original Final Fantasy VII are back and again expanded and reimagined, bigger and better than ever. I think the Chocobo racing in particular is one I want to talk about. I thought that was great.
I had a great time on it. Like the courses were a lot of fun. I love the drifting mechanic.
It felt like Crash Team Racing on Chocobos, drifting around the corners, getting the speed out of the corners, knocking into other jockeys. Really, really exciting. And I have no doubt that later on I'm going to be back there.
Oh, definitely.
Racing those Chocobos a whole lot. You mentioned Chocobos as well. You can also famously get outfits for them.
Yes.
So when you go and pet the Chocobos out in the wild by the bus stops, you get like a golden Chocobo feather. You can trade those for Chocobo tack at a tack shop. But those aren't just aesthetic. They also have buffs and abilities when you go and do those Chocobo races. So certain bits of equipment will give you certain boosts in the race, and I like that. Gold Saucer is obviously a big place where lots of these mini games are housed, and if you remember a mini game from the original Final Fantasy VII in the Gold Saucer, chances are it's in Rebirth. I absolutely love what they've done with the little fighting game.
Yes.
Where it's basically a little fighting game, and it gives you polygonal Final Fantasy VII original-esque character models. I love the PS1-esque versions of those characters.
You know me, if I see anything retro or PS1, I'm like, yes. So when I love seeing Dio pop up in his little polygonal way as well.
Dio.
Just going from him when he's introduced, he's always, every pose is like the muscle pose and the pecs are popping.
Dio is something else in
Rebirth.
He's
fantastic. I love him. What a character.
Yeah.
But seeing him being all muscular and flesh, and then just immediately flesh and then immediately going into the polygonal form, and it's still just as good. It's just so good, so brilliantly done.
Well, there's honestly so much to discover in this game. It's good. If you do everything, you're easily talking 100 hours.
Yeah.
And that is all it's so full of stuff. Like, we weren't going to talk about the story anyway in this video, but we've not talked about that at all. There's obviously the thrust of the story, and it really pulls you through, and you're constantly faced with this dilemma of I really want to know what happens next.
All the time.
I have to get to this next bit because I know sort of what's going to be coming.
Yeah.
But also, there's this whole beautiful stretch of open world I haven't explored yet, and it's just you will never ever be bored playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. There's always
mind-blowing how they've managed to fit all of this in. Even from a technical standpoint, there's so many different styles of mini games. There's so many characters always around. The environments are always so varied and beautiful. It's amazing how they've managed to fit all of this into. Not even it's only a part of the Final Fantasy VII story. It's still only the second entry of this trilogy that's going to happen. So it's how have they fit it all in?
It's honestly a miracle. I think it's a miracle of a game. I really do. It's so huge, so joyful, so beautiful, so colourful. And for me, as a fan of the original Final Fantasy VII, it goes beyond what I thought it could be. I've seen all the trailers up until now. I didn't think, how are they actually going to do this? Can they actually pull this off? And they have. They've gone so far beyond what I thought was possible. Even comparing it to Remake, the difference between Remake, which by its nature was a bit more linear, your exploration was, curtailed by the fact that you were within Midgar essentially the whole time. Now you've just been let out into this world. It really feels like Square Enix have been okay, people liked Remake. Let's really go for it with this.
I didn't expect that they were going to go as big as they have done. The amount of mini games alone just goes to show how big they have gone on this project, and it really does show.
It really does. Well, the game is out. The wait is over. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is out right now on PS5. If you are playing it, please let us know in the comments. Give us an example of one of the things you noticed from the original Final Fantasy VII that you really enjoyed seeing reimagined in Rebirth, because there's going to be so much of it. And we will maybe be back with more Final Fantasy VII Rebirth content a little later on.
We can't stop talking about it.
We can't stop talking about it. But yeah, enjoy the game. It's been worth the wait. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see more on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. we'll be back very soon. Thanks for watching.